Okay, we reached the final blot of Mesechta Shabbos.
What's next? What's next, Ernie?
Eruvim.
Oh, wow. Can't wait.
I like that. I like that one.
Why?
Because it's, for me, it's more
Concrete?
Yeah.
Okay, Kuf Nun Zayin, 157. Ein Mavakin Eitzim in HaKoros. We're bringing a proof from Rav Yochanan, from a Stam Mishnah, that Rav Yochanan cannot hold like Rav Shimon regarding Muktzah. It says you may not chop up a beam that fell. Let's say you have a beam that holds up a house and the beam collapsed, and or you have beams that are going to be used to build a house. You can't chop them up for firewood because those beams have been set aside for construction. And so this fits Rabbi Yehuda, who holds of Muktzah. Same thing on if it breaks on Yontif. So this seems to be according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who is stringent by Muktzah, not like Rabbi Shimon. How can you tell me Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Shimon? So Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda Mastin. Rabbi Yochanan, this was not a Stam Mishnah called Rabbi Yochanan. It was not an anonymous, unnamed Mishnah. According to Rabbi Yochanan's tradition, this Mishnah was learned by Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, not Rabbi Yehuda himself. Toshma. Matchilin ba'arima satevim. Avalo be'etzim shebemuktzah. Let's say you have straw set aside for food. So that you could use on Yontif for firewood. Avalo be'etzim shebemuktzah. But let's say you had set aside wood in the backyard. The muktzah was more not a backyard, it was like a private dump that you might have had in your backyard, which clearly means you don't want to use it for, it's like long-term storage, let's say. You didn't want to use it for that yontif. And since you didn't designate it for use, it's not allowed. So this seems again to be the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. How can you say Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Shimon? The Gemara says you don't understand. Hosam ba'arzei vashuchi, that's cedar wood, very expensive wood that people would not use for firewood. They would use for building purposes, etc. That's why it's muktzah, not because. And even Rab Shimon would agree the muktzah machmas chisor kitzah for Rab Shimon moed. Muktzah because something is used, like we learned about a saw or a plow or something that a person wouldn't use because it's worth a lot of money for his profession. It's a muktzah machmas chisor and kiss. That would be another example of it. Even Rab Shimon would agree that that's muktzah. Toshma, I'll bring another brayso that's unnamed, that seems to be according to Rabbi Yehuda, and yet you say Rabbi Yochanan holds a Mishnah, halachas like that. So how can you tell me that Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Shimon? Mashkin v'shachtas amidbarios, undomesticated animals that live out in the desert, you can't shech them on Yontif because even though it's a regular animal that's kosher that you could use, since you didn't set it aside Erev Yontif, because it wasn't even in your house, it was out in the field. You can't use it. So again, this Mishnah seems to be like Rabbi Yehuda, and it's unnamed, it's anonymous. And Rav Shimon has said that the halach is like anonymous Mishnahs. So how can you tell me that Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rav Shimon? Because Rabbi Yochanan stomach rina ashter. Rabbi Yochanan had a different source for this halacha. Beishamai oimrim magbim me'al hashulchan atzamos uklipin.
Would you be allowed to skin a behemoth on Yontif? That's the reason that they do it. What's the purpose of skinning a behemoth on Yontif?
To get at the meat.
Huh?
To get at the meat.
Oh, so you can, but usually you skin it because you want the skin.
I understand, but you're allowed to eat. You're allowed to do malach on Yontif for oichel nefesh.
You couldn't get oichel nefesh without skinning it? I guess maybe not.
how are you going to get it? How are you going to, so they would give the animal a lot of water to drink to make it easier to take
To
the
make it
hide
easier
off
to
the skin.
I realize that.
Easier
So
to
you couldn't get
skin.
the oichel from inside. The
There's
inside of the
no,
No,
Elazar,
the flesh has to be skinned to get at the flesh.
skin.
uh,
Maybe you can come up with a way, Elazar, you can do that. It's a new way. You can get the meat out without touching the flesh. It's a good way.
So Beishamai Omer Makbim El HaShulchan Ad Sama Suklitin, if you have on the table bones and shells, so since the whole walnut or the whole whatever you were eating was already designated for use on Yontif, the shells as well were not muktzah. Beis Hillel said, "Misalik is a tavla kula menara." You couldn't touch the bones and the shells themselves. You have to pick up the table and shake it off. Now, the Omer of Nachman Anu Ein Lanu Ela Beis Shammai Rab Yehuda Beis Hillel Rab Shimon. This brisa was mixed up because the initial brisa seems to suggest that Beis Shammai is lenient regarding muktzah, but Rav Nachman says no. We have a tradition that Beis Shammai is the one who holds like Rab Yehuda, and Beis Hillel holds like Rab Shimon. And Rab Yochanan held like that Mishnah. Okay, so we did not find a kasha on Rab Yochanan that stood regarding this issue. It seems like everybody held, the last people we quoted, that the halacha is like Rab Shimon regarding muktzah. So Pliga Baravacha Ravina. So at the end, remember, there are two final editors of Talmud Bavli, was Ravina and Ravashi. So so you notice it's Ravina here. They're sort of going back at Mesechta Shabbos and giving us a summary. Throughout Mesechta Shabbos, the halach is like Rab Shimon, lebar mi muktzah machmas mius, except regarding kalim, like an old candelabra that's full of wax and oil, which is filthy. That's muktzah because of its disgusting. There, even Rab Shimon would hold that it's of that muktzah. Otherwise, halacha is like Rab Shimon, except in that case, where it's like Rab Yehuda. My new ner yosh. Rab Shimon didn't accept muktzah machmas mius, and the halacha is like him even by that. Levar mi muktzah machmas isser. What the halacha is not like Rab Shimon is only regarding one instance, which is, let's say, a burning candelabra, a candelabra that's burning that you lit that is lit at the time that Shabbos comes. So Bein HaShmashos, it was already lit. It's also to light a candle on Shabbos, so that's called muktzah machmas isser. And therefore, even when the candle burns out, you can't touch it. And the example the Gemara gives is ner shedliku b'bosu Shabbos, right? A candle that's burning that Shabbos. The halacha is like Rab Shimon everywhere except by that. Aval muktzah machmas chisoron kisaf Rab Shimon moide. Rab Shimon is agreeing with Rabbi Yehuda that there is an example of muktzah regarding something expensive, like we said, like if you have a surgeon's scalpel or a saw or some kind of implement that's expensive that you would set aside, you don't want anybody using because it's going to break it. So kol hakolim nitolim b'Shabbos chutz mimasar hagadol, which is the saw, the yatet shel machresha, and part of the plow. And some hold that when we say b'chol haShabbos kula halach Rab Shimon, it's not regarding these particular dinim of muktzah, but it's regarding all the machloikas between Rab Shimon and Rab Yehuda throughout Mesechta Shabbos. For example, davar she'em miskavein, right, not having kavana, and malacha she'em tzrich legufa, where Rab Shimon was always lenient. And some say halachas like that throughout, and we mentioned that as we went through the various sugyas, that we paskin like Rab Shimon regarding those issues as well. Mishnah. This is the last Mishnah, Mesechta Shabbos. Mefirin nedorim b'Shabbos. So if a person's wife or daughter made a neder, so if you as the husband or the father, because it says binu ureya beis aviha and isha hafeiram, the din is the husband on hearing a neder can annul it. That's called mefirin nedorim. could do it on Shabbos. Now, let's say it was beyond 24 hours, or you made your own personal neder. The other way of getting rid of a neder is going to a chacham and asking a she'el. You'd ask a shaila to the bezdin to uproot the neder. They would ask you, listen, if you would have known that this and this is the circumstance by making this neder, would you have made the neder in the first place? That's called a pesach, and it causes you to have charata. It causes you to have regret that you made the neder, so they can annul your neder. But that's through the process of she'ela. And this Mr. says that if it's for a neder that relates to Shabbos, you can go to a chacham and ask it to be. So, for example, if his wife a week ago, and he remember you only have 24 hours to be made for your wife's neder. So let's say the wife made a neder a week ago, and the neder was, I'm not going to eat on Shabbos. So the husband wants to annul such a neder because you're supposed to eat on Shabbos. So you can go to a chacham on Shabbos to ask to have that neder undone. Now the Gemara is going to ask, well, what about the first part of the Mishnah, when we say mefirim nedorim b'Shabbos, that within 24 hours you can be made for a neder? You know, it's not through bezdin; it's your own personal annulment of your wife or daughter's neder. Is that any kind of neder, or is that also only letzorch Shabbos? Because it seems like it's two separate clauses. Mefirim nedorim b'Shabbos, period. Then v'nishol nedorim she'en letzorch Shabbos, or is she'en letzorch Shabbos go back to the first part of the Mishnah as well? Okay, so we'll just keep that in mind. Upoiki kinasama or. The Mishnah we hold like Chachamim. We had this whole debate. Can you put a shutter into a window to close up the window? So remember, there were those that prohibited because it looks like binyan. However, this Mishnah is saying no. Poiki kinasama or, and moidedin amatlis. You can measure with a ruler. So, for example, you have a shmata. It's got to be 3 by 3 etzbos in order to be makabel tumah. Let's say you want, and let's say you got to measure it in order to know. So you're allowed to measure. And more than this, a mikvah. You can measure a mikvah. We know that a mikvah has to have 40 saw, but the measurement is 1 amma deep. 3 ammas deep by 1 amma by 1 amma. 3 square ammas holds 40 saw. So an amma, we know, is about 2 feet, right? So something 6 feet deep and 2 feet wide and 2 feet long. Such a bore in the ground would hold 40 saw. That's how the Chachamim calculate. So you could measure a mikveh on Shabbos to determine if it's a kosher mikveh.
How can you? It's a form of boine. How can you do that? You're measuring to make sure that something's okay. I don't understand.
You're not boine. You're measuring that.
And the same thing with the window. How can you measure the window? The window has to be ready to be put in. I mean, if it's not ready exactly the way it is, what's the point of measuring the window?
No, you're not measuring the window. Poitikin and sama or is a separate halach.
I understand.
If you have a shutter, you're allowed to put the shutter in the window. That was a debate.
Yeah, but it says you're allowed to measure also here.
Now, there's another halach separate from poitikin and sama or.
I understand, but how would you be able to measure? If you're measuring, you're going to do something with that measurement. Why are you measuring?
I said, because let's say a sheretz fell on a shmata, and you want to know whether this shmata is big enough to be makabel tumah or not, because that shmata touched one of your foods. So if it's not 3 by 3 etzbos, the shmata would not be makabel tumah. So the Mishnah is telling you, I'm allowed to measure. Measuring is not an issur. According to this Mishnah, it's permitted. And
okay.
same thing, you can measure the depth of a mikvah to know whether or not the mikvah is a kosher mikvah. So we'll see what this case is. There's a complicated case where a corpse was lying in an alley, and there was a barrel on top of the corpse, and the barrel fit exactly between the walls of two houses, and there was a crack in one of the houses. The din is the tumah would be oila into the one of the houses because it's like in an oil, unless there was a defect in the crack, unless there was a defect in the barrel that would allow the tumah to go up. So, and what they did, the people in the house, they took something and they stuck a jug and they stuck it into the crack to try to prevent the tumah from going in there. The kosher hamakeda begemi, they tied also another klicheres with some kind of like nylon or something to measure leda im yesh bagigis poseh tefach lo. They were using this as a measurement to measure whether the dimension of the crack in that barrel that's sitting on top of the corpse was a tefach or not. Because if it was a tefach, we'll see that it would cause the tumah to go up to the sky and not infect the houses. So you see, they allowed all these things: measuring, untying, sticking something in a window. Umidivreim lamadnu, from this halacha we learned shepoikikin umoidedin v'koishrin b'shabbos. As long as it's a kesh, you could tie. As long as it's not a kesher shel kayama, even lechatchila you could do. It's not just a b'diavad dikadin. Gemara. So we iboilu hafar. That which we said in the Mishnah that a husband can annul his wife's nedarim, is that bein letzorach bein shelo letzorach. That's whether it was needed for Shabbos or not. And the halacha of she'ela, going to a chacham, is only letzorach in shelo letzorach lo. If it was not for tzorach Shabbos, you could not go. Umishum hachi kaflaginu me'adodi, and that's why it seems in the Mishnah that the two halachos were learned separately. O Dilma, or perhaps you learn the two clauses as one clause, and therefore also hafar nami l'tzorach and shalom l'tzorach lo, that even when a husband is annulling his wife's nedarim, it's only l'tzorach Shabbos. The reason why it seems like the Mishnah sort of mentioned it as two clauses, mishum da'afara ein tzorach beis din, u'she'ela tzricha beis din. It's just because the mechanisms of the two things are different. Hafar does not need Bezdin, Shem needs Bezdin. But really the halach is the same. So what's the din? Toshma. So bring you a proof. The Tani Zuti Debe Rav Papa. It was learned by Rav Yeshiva Rav Papa. Mefirin Nedarim b'Shabbos l'tzorach HaShabbos. That annulment on Shabbos was only for Nedarim that affected Shabbos. L'tzorach Shabbos in, Shalom l'tzorach Shabbos lo. Okay, that seems to be a proof that answers our question that even Hafara has to be done only the Tzorach Shabbos. Okay, Lishnachri, no? There's another version of this dialogue. Iboiluhu, the question was asked like this. Litzorech means these things could be done if you needed it for Shabbos. Atarvayukton. That's on both Hafara and She'ela. V'shelo l'tzorach lo. But you could not use these techniques if it was not needed for Shabbos. Now, what do we see from there? Alma for Sodorim is me'es la'es. So here's the issue. Let's say you heard your wife make a neder at 4:00 in the afternoon on the third day of Cheshvan. So do you get 24 hours me'es la'es from that 4 p.m.? And so that means you get from 4 p.m. to the 4 p.m. of the next day. You get a full 24 hours to be made for. Or you can only be made for your wife's neder on that day. So 4 p.m. third Cheshvan, you have until Tzeisa Koichavim of the third of Cheshvan. That night, you would not be able to make for the neder anymore. So what's the din there? So if you're telling me Shelo l'tzorach lo, Alma, from here we would say Afor Sodorim is me'es la'es. You have full 24 hours. So let's say 4 p.m. was Friday. So you know why you're allowed to do L'tzorach yes and not L'tzorach no, because you have 24 hours. So that brings you to 4 p.m. on Shabbos. And you have to do it, because if you don't do it within that period of time on Shabbos, L'tzorach Shabbos, it's not going to help for Shabbos. That means if you held that you could only be made for on the same day, then there's no point to be matter you to do it, because you could do it. You could only have the ability to do it on Friday. Once Shabbos hit, you wouldn't have the ability to do it anymore. Oh, Dilma, or perhaps the svor is like this. When do we say that it's only because of Shabbos needs you can annul these nedorim? That's Ash'ela Hudikton. That's going to a bezdin, because there's no time limit there. And you need, let's say Shabbos morning, you heard your wife, you made a ned there. So, and not to eat on Shabbos, you already got Shabbos. But it's only for L'tzorech. But for Stam and ned, that had nothing to do with Shabbos, you could wait till after Shabbos. Avala force nadorim, afil shalom L'tzorech. But a husband annulling his wife's neder, that's even for any purpose. And that would mean, alma force nadorim kol hayom. Because according to that shot, the annulment by a husband would only be that calendar day until the nightfall. And therefore you could annul any kind of neder. So what is it? Toshma. The Torah of Zutit Vera Papi, Mefir Nedorim b'Shabbos l'tzorach Shabbos. A husband can annul his wife's neder on Shabbos for purposes of Shabbos. So that implies l'tzorach Shabbos in, shelo l'tzorach Shabbos lo, and alma force nedorim is meis leis. And therefore you have 24 hours to be made for nedorim. On Rav Ashi, v'anan tnan haforce nedorim kol hayom. Haforce nedorim is all day, which l'chura would not be 24 hours. And Rav Ashi says, yesh b'davar lahakil lahachmir. There are aspects to make it stringent and to make it lenient. Ketzar. Nadra Lele Shabbos. Let's say the wife made her neder Friday night. Made for Lele Shabbos b'yom Shabbos achetechra. You can annul that neder until Motzei Shabbos. But the thing is, it's on the same calendar day. Friday night is already Daled Cheshvan, and it remains Daled Cheshvan until Motzei Shabbos the next day. Nadra im chashech. Let's say she made the neder right before Lichtbenchen Friday. May for Achelo Techsha. You can only annul until Lichtbenchen. How can you tell me? Because Rav Ashi, so based on this, Rav Ashi is asking the Gemara, how can you tell me a force of Dormeis Leis? From this mission, it seems it's only calendrical. You can only be made for until the night. So the Gemara says Tanoi. The Machlok is Tanoim, the Tanya. Which means only that day. You would not go 24 hours. And the Shulchan Aruch says, it's only that day. We don't calculate 24 hours. It's nightfall to nightfall. Then at Torah's Nedorim, mutar lishol lat nedorim b'Shabbos afil nedorim she'efshar hayla lishol aleim koydem haShabbos. You can go to a bezdin to ask on Shabbos, even if you have the opportunity to do it before Shabbos. But the only kind of nedorim we can go to bezdin for is those nedorim that affect Shabbos. And regarding haforas nedorim of your wife, mefer abal liishto kol neder shenodra b'Shabbos. Afilu ain't a kosher b'tzarchei Shabbos. You can annul your wife's nedorim on Shabbos, even they're not related to Shabbos. Because if you don't do it, you won't be able to do it, because we learned that it stops by nightfall. So if he doesn't do it on Shabbos, he's not going to be able to do it anymore. Then it says, "V'nisharim l'nedorim, iboilu kishloya lo pnai." Going to bezdin on Shabbos, is it only when you didn't have time to do it before Shabbos? Or maybe it makes no difference. Toshma, that's the kikuler abundant of Zutra Rav Zeh, Rabbi Shalom, and Drev Afalkav Davalek. somebody came to the Chachamim, Rav Zutra ben Rav Zera, and they undid his wife's Nedarim, even though he had time before Shabbos to do it. So, and that's why the Shulchan Aruch paskins like this final piece of Gemara. Then the Mishnah says, "Paklasama orbit fiach." They shut up the window. The kosher some makeda begemi. They tied, right? And I explained was the case of this corpse in the alley with the barrel over it. Right? There was like an alley between two houses. The Tuma Haisasham, there was a corpse lying there. The Gigis Stuka Monachos Agaban, and there was a barrel lying on top of it, but it was the barrel fit right between the two walls. So it created like a roof over the corpse, but the barrel was cracked. So and then there was a window leading into one of the houses. So if the crack was not as big of a tefach, so the barrel would have held the tumah in underneath the barrel, and then the tumah would have flowed through the window into the house, and it would have been matame everything there. So what they did is, they shuttered the window on Shabbos. The kosher samakeda agemi, they tied something to drop into the barrel as a measuring, to see whether the crack in the barrel was as big as a tefach. If it was, then there wouldn't be a problem with the tumah going into the house. But what do we see? That all these actions, poikikin, tying, and measuring, were permitted lechatchila on Shabbos. And that's why we have a story that fulfills what the Mishnah said. This last piece of Ula, we will leave for the Siyum. So, Yeshikoyach, everybody. It's 157 blot Mesechta Shabbos. Yeshikoyach to everybody. And Mirz Hashem will start tomorrow, Erevin, 8:00 p.m. And tonight will be Novi Shir at 8:00.
Ernie, would you